Hi there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. Today I'm joined by Pete Ryan. Pete Ryan is currently the co-CEO of CoSell, a venture-backed startup in Austin, Texas. CoSell is a network for B2B sales teams to uncover relationship intelligence with partners and key accounts. Formerly, Pete was the head of enterprise sales at Trello, CEO of GoGo Hire, and an early sales rep at LinkedIn. Today's title of our episode is The Future of Demand Gen and Collaborative Selling, and our tagline is, It's clear that traditional prospecting is heading towards a cliff. What should you do about it? Thanks for joining us on the show, Pete.
Hey David, thanks for having me.
So when we talk about demand gen, that's not a less than common term. Would you like to define that?
Yeah, really, it's how you reach your customers, right? So it could be digital advertising, outbound sales, building up an SDR team to make a bunch of cold calls, send a bunch of emails. That's yeah, it's yeah, we've seen it change over the last 10 years, right? And it's certainly heading towards a cliff. But yeah, we can talk more about that.
What would you say it started off 10 years ago, and how do you think it's been evolving ever since?
Yeah, well, if you look at the Lumascape, right, the Martech Lumascape, from like 2010 to 2015 to today, just the sheer amount of companies on there has just exploded. And so, um, obviously, like, competition and monopolies and copycats and companies getting funded has all kind of put a lot of pressure,
Hmm.
right, on how companies are going to market. And there's just more marketing technology, right, than ever before, on the digital advertising side, and then also when you look at outbound sales, right, which we kind of like to call like brute force automation is kind of what it's become. You have so many tools that have really just automated the prospecting effort, right, which is just ultimately creating more noise in the market.
And you used to work at LinkedIn. I imagine that like influences a lot of your views on that topic. Is that right?
Yeah. So, yeah, my co-founder was really early at LinkedIn. His name's Brendan Cassidy. He was employee 15, 16, something like
True.
that. So, yeah. And then, I came in probably, employee 200 something. But, I think, LinkedIn really try to solve for how companies recruit, hire, market, and sell, really, right?
Hmm.
On the sales side of things, you would have thought that like LinkedIn would have kind of used this professional graph, right, to enable salespeople to um, ultimately like co-sell and sell with partners. But they've kind of missed that. They missed that boat, right? And that ship's kind of sailed. So it's kind of a void we're looking to fill with co-sell.
Is there a reason you think the ship has sailed and they can't like get into it now? Is it what makes you think it's too late for them?
Yeah. So really a couple of different factors, right? First factor is at least for me, right? I'll like if someone wants to connect with me, right, and I find their profile interesting, I'll connect with them, right?
Hmm.
And so I think just the sheer amount of connections have exploded on LinkedIn, but the amount of like meaningful connections, right,
Oh,
have
okay.
really remained
Decline
flat,
too.
right? And so if you're gonna try to break into an account via referral, yeah, it's just the likelihood, the accuracy, and the effort, right, involved in using LinkedIn is just is too out of whack, so to speak.
There's a lot of times I'll connect to someone on LinkedIn, and the funny thing is they'll mention these like mutual connections, and when I ask them about these people, they're like, "Oh yeah, they just added me one day. I have no actual connections to them."
Right. Yeah, that's
Like, oh,
exactly
that's
right. Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of what's happened, right? And then also, if you were going to have two sales teams try to go to market together using LinkedIn, obviously like the incentives aren't aligned, the platform wasn't built for that, it wasn't purpose built for that. So, but yeah, LinkedIn's an amazing tool, right? It's something salespeople use every day.
So, where do you think maybe going wrong is too strong of a term, but like where do you think they like should have changed things such that it could have been a more, I guess, real relationship based social network versus a hey, we happen to be in the same industry, let's connect type of industry.
Yeah. So, um, Yeah, maybe it'd be helpful if I like gave some background on CoSell and like what we're looking to do.
Sure.
But yeah, so really what's happened, right, is like the ownership of demand gen has shifted a great deal from marketing to sales, right? And for obvious reasons, right? Like a lot of the digital channels that we talked about, right, have they've obviously too much noise, right? The CAC's like gone through the roof. So what's happened is like these sales teams are now having to basically do all their outbound prospecting through like brute force automation, which is also, heading towards the cliff. And so, when you look at kind of like marketing, cold outreach, and then referrals is really being like the last option, right, for companies to go to market. Um, yeah, using a tool like LinkedIn, when you kind of just measure it by like accuracy, effort level, and then the time commitment, and actually like getting two sales teams that are going after like the same motion, right? So like for instance, if we're both selling to CMOs, right, we could partner up and try to find out, okay, where are my prospects your customers, and where where are my prospects your customers, where are your prospects my customers, right? And then start to make warm intros for each other. um, and so, obviously, yeah, if you were to try to even like attempt this on LinkedIn, it just wasn't built for that. Ultimately, it's so. Um, there's some sales teams, right, that will use it for trying to, get referrals, right, through
Hmm.
warm introductions. But ultimately, it's just more of like a directory, and a directory of people, and in-mails, right? Which like were the novel thing, which again, like those have become super saturated, right? I don't know if you get hit up all the time, but I
I
get,
do.
all the, it's like, it's crazy, right? It's, kind of almost in some days, like worse than my Gmail my inbox. So, yeah, it's kind of just noisy all around, right? So, with CoSell, right, like what we're super excited about is this concept of like companies kind of joining as a herd. And I'll kind of go like Discovery Channel on you for a second.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure you've seen like the you know Discovery Channel, where there's like the wildebeest like trying to cross the desert alone, right? As a startup, right? Like going it alone is just it comes like just riddled with a lot of risk, right? Again, like tons of competition, really noisy marketplace, hard to break in through customers. But then, there's kind of this concept too of like, well, why don't you, try to get from A to B, right, as a herd, right? And that's kind of our whole concept is, find other companies that are going after your same buyer that are not competitive, and partner up on a platform, and
Hmm.
co-sell together, right? So it's, ultimately like multiplying the strength of your sales team across all the sales teams that you're partnered up with. And that's essentially what co-sell does.
Okay. And how'd you get that? How'd you start that? Because I imagine there's a lot of I don't know, like network effects built into like a platform like this. How'd you like get past that initial friction?
Yeah. So, yeah, I'll kind of just like zoom out real quick. Like, so I was over at Trello, right? And so Trello, collaboration software, company got acquired by Atlassian. And so after Trello was acquired, I was like super excited because Atlassian had, 100,000 customers. Trello at the time had like 500 enterprise
Mm.
customers, tons of free users. And, I was really excited about that because like, we could start to leverage the Trello sales team to break into accounts.
Hmm.
So what we needed was like visibility on, okay, well, who's the rep on the Atlassian side that owns Walmart, right?
I see.
And so then like I could connect someone on my team to then talk to that Atlassian rep, and then they could like make an intro into that account. And what the best we could end up doing, because like we were on two different instances of Salesforce, was like this referrals for sales Slack channel. So we'd go in and say, hey, who on that Atlassian side owns Walmart, right? And then Jill would raise her hand and say, oh, it's me. Happy to make an intro. Happy to talk about the account, so on and so forth. And so really there's just a much better way of doing that. And ultimately, it comes down to you know connect your CRM or upload a list of your prospects and customers to co-sell, invite your partners, and then find out where there's these overlap. And so we started with just like a handful of companies on CoSell doing this, right? And about half of them, right, have closed deals, and it's only been like
Hmm.
a couple months, right? So, it works, which is awesome. I think the biggest challenge, right, biggest challenge and opportunity is it's a change in behavior, right?
Yeah.
Because you know, um, you're asking for sales reps to put down, the brute force automation tools and like do something different, right? Which, ultimately it's a behavior change that has to happen,
Hmm.
right? And will happen because of, the pressure that's happening with these other tools. So.
So when you think about your customers, the people who use your software, are you targeting people who already have like partnerships that just don't have a good SaaS model around them, or are you trying to help them build those partnerships, or both?
Yeah, really both, right? Because we can power an existing companies partnership ecosystem. But I think what's been really exciting for us is like we can have startups sign up, and then just by them, uploading their prospects and customers, we'll actually recommend companies to them to partner with based on target buyer.
Hmm.
So if you sign up and you're looking and you're targeting heads of customer success, you can find other companies that are also targeting heads of customer success already on CoSell.
Hmm.
So yeah, that was kind of like the first thing that we built, right? Because for a lot of startups, you just don't know who to partner with first, right? And we can help solve for that.
And is it the users, your platform, that define what they're willing to like give in terms of a like referral like structure, or do you like recommend one, or how does that work out?
Yeah, so we actually have templates for like referral partnerships, right?
Okay.
So, we'll oftentimes give that to a founder or CRO that, is really early, but realizing, okay, this is another channel that they can potentially use for co-selling. But, yeah, we're doing a bit of that. And then all of that's kind of happening offline though, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, happening outside of co-sell, which is fine, right? But eventually we see an opportunity to bring, all the payment processing, so on and so forth, all on co-sell.
So you're trying to facilitate the referral payouts also in your platform, is that right?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
How
Yep.
do you how do you I guess get started with the so I guess how do you get started with like a pricing model around all this? Like how does your company make money?
Yeah. So it's really companies that want to create their own herd, and we're actually calling it herds.
I do like
You
the term.
yeah. You create your own sales herd, and we're still playing around with that name, by the way.
Okay.
We might go with like hub or cluster. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. What do you think? What would be a good name for that?
I think herd's pretty cool. Like I think it's like
Yeah.
herds are groups of animals that live together and they have like synergistic, I don't know, synergistic relationship or symbiotic relationships where they help each other, and I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it could, hub sounds interesting too. So, long story short, is how we price how we price things out. Yeah, is really based on if you want to create your own kind of hub or herd or cluster. Uh, you know, basically, yeah, it'll require an enterprise subscription of CoSell. If you're invited to one of those hubs or clusters, it's actually free to use CoSell. So
Hmm.
yeah, to your point earlier, yeah, there's certainly these inherent network effects built into CoSell, which make the platform, um, it's great, right, for us, especially as like a lead funnel, right, to get more companies on. But yeah, today we actually just signed on our 27th customer,
Hmm.
and yeah, so we're still early days. We raised our seed round in December of last year, and then a couple hundred companies in total on CoSell. So um, yeah, that's kind of how we price things out.
Is the target customer of your customer generally in the enterprise space, or are you more agnostic?
Yeah, really, our target today are companies that already have some sort of existing referral program in place,
I
right?
see.
Where they're thinking about referrals. Average deal size is over 30K, and they have really this pain point, which like most sales teams have, which is how do I generate more leads for the
Hmm.
company? How do I up level? up level my point of entry, right? Meaning like, what is the most strategic way possible to get in front of an account or learn about an account, right? Because there's all this like tribal knowledge that happens with the sales team we found, right? Where it's, you're having a salesperson, talk to an account, and they're learning the ins and outs of, you know, um, the procurement process. Okay, is there a security review, legal review? Who's the champion? Who's the buyer? Who's the decision maker? All that stuff, and that's really something that can be shared, across multiple sales teams, right?
Mm.
And so, we're kind of like looking at it as, what's the best and easiest way possible to unlock like this like relationship intelligence, but then also how to drive value across sales teams. So you're,
Mm.
you know, yeah, driving the exchange of value across sales teams really. So it's kind of this give and take of sharing sales insights and making warm intros into accounts where it makes sense.
So I guess taking a step back into your journey of being a salesperson, is that something you organically did? You like just partnered with salespeople from other teams? Is that something you intuitively knew to do? Because I think that's not something that's I'm not a traditional salesperson, so I guess I don't know. But is that something that's normal?
Yeah, so it depends, but like for us at Trello, we had no issue with getting leads, but actually getting, because there were like millions of people on the free product, right? So we had like access to or ability, right, to like generate leads on with no problem. But getting to the right person, right, the buyer was oftentimes someone in security.
I
And
see.
that's where, if another company like Box or Dropbox already had to find out, okay, this is the person in security that you should be working with, then it makes a ton of sense, right? And so I think there's companies that are doing this offline, but see that, yeah, you can't do this with multiple partners with like many sales reps, right? On the
It just
back.
doesn't scale well on paper.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's a behavior change that like really it's going to have to happen, right? Because especially any seed funded Series A funded company that's just like just trying to get going and generating like revenue, it's hard. It's really really hard
Hmm.
to get in front of like the right decision makers. So like if you're able to get in through the side door through a warm referral and like kind of gain all this intelligence around a certain account that you're trying to get into, there's a ton of value in that. And I think our kind of like end vision, right, is how can we make the lives of salespeople just better, right, and make revenue really more human, right?
Hmm.
Because it's kind of gone from being very human, door to door sales to the invention of email and then the invention of marketing automation and then sales automation to where it's become so transactional. And so like, how do we go back to, making sales really based on relationships um, and we think that, we have a decent shot at solving for that.
It's funny you say that because I spent call it almost the last year trying to do sales for another business that I run. And I've tried all the quote unquote like brute force methods that you've suggested, and at some level they might work for certain products, but they're not universal by far. And I think something I've been learning is the fact that relationships the core of everything. People like to buy from those they trust to be competent as well as like as people, and I think that's a game changer compared to like the automated cold calls or cold emails or cold LinkedIn messages.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's like if you do the back of the napkin math, right? Like let's just say your quote is $1 million, your average deal size is 100K, your average, your close rate's like 10% on deals, so you're having to create, you know, um, 5x that in pipeline, or I'm sorry, no, 10%, yeah, 10x that in pipeline, right? And 10x or 10% is probably normal for startup, probably goes up to like 20%, so
Hmm.
5x pipeline. Um, and if your email response rate, right, is like 1%, and that's the response rate, it's like how many emails do you have to send? Being like tens of thousands of emails, right? Literally, and that's just for like one sales rep. So um, there's certainly just such a better way to do it, and the customers that have signed up already are seeing the fruits of the value there. So it's super exciting. And I think there's also this kind of something we've learned, right, which is, typically partnerships are owned by your partner manager, head of alliances, so on and so forth, right? And I think what we're trying to build is like software that really enables sales to work more effectively with partnerships,
Hmm.
because oftentimes like the head of alliances or partnerships and the sales team is like they're in a battle with each other, right? Because like the head of partnerships has a quota, sales reps have a quota, and so they're both like wanting credit for deals,
Right,
right?
right.
So but if we can help enable like the just easier tracking and measuring of partner source and partner influence deals, and that's just a win-win for everyone involved in co-selling, which could kind of start with the CEO or CRO, and then it's executed by the head of partnerships and alliances, and then the beneficiary obviously of all this is like the sales rep, right? Kind of the one ultimately closing the deals. So it's you know it's yeah, there's a lot of parties involved. That's what we're learning, but yeah, it's also an awesome opportunity too. So
When I was at Uber, the first team I started in was the referrals team. So it's a growth team. The goal of the team was to drive as much user growth on the driver side as possible through this engine of like referrals. The idea is if you refer someone, the quality of those referrals are higher quality, higher LTV, like minimal or like less customer support friction. Like there's all these benefits that come from referrals than compared to like a cold lead, and it's kind of cool to see how that plays out in other industries as well.
yeah, and like what was it? What type of referrals were they?
So it's kind of one of those. So I was on the driver team. The goal was to get more drivers on the Uber platform,
Got
and we
it.
had to like figure out like one from a technical side, like how can we make this as smooth as possible? Or sorry, how can we make this as efficient as possible? Just because most referral systems like incorporate some sort of like give one get one type of philosophy. So back then it was like you refer your friend and they give X amount of like rides on the platform, they'll get some like referral payout bonus, and we had to track all the trip count for that and make sure they were eligible. And then on the user side, we wanted to make sure like it was delightful as possible, as well as the monetary amounts were the right amounts that actually like motivated change in behavior.
Interesting, huh? That's really cool. And at Uber, like what? Yeah, there's always like one side of the marketplace, right? That's hard to get.
Or
Was it?
two, or three.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In Uber's case, like what side of the marketplace was harder, or did it really depend on the market?
I
Um,
spent most of my time on the driver side teams, so I think I got
the
to see more
supply
of that
side,
world.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's I think very based in the city, and it's you'll and they would tweak the numbers on the referrals, and they'll tweak the campaign numbers to make the I guess supply and demand match. But definitely it
Mhm.
was a hard job for whoever had that role.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. Yeah, and so it was like kind of some sort of like referral link, right?
Right.
That they would share, and then you got it and get some, like maybe a $500 bonus or whatever for doing that. That's cool. That's really cool.
So I noticed over at CoSell, you also use the same structure of having like co-CEOs. How'd that
Yep.
come about, and how do you like choose to split responsibilities or domains?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So Brennan and I, we overlap on a lot, right? It's like a lot on the sales side and customer success side. Um, yeah, when it comes to product, right? I'm more focused on that and marketing, and then I would say when it comes to fundraising, like he's more focused on that,
Hmm.
right? And so, yeah, it's like um, we opted for that, and it's really risky with a lot of companies to do that, right? Because if you have like a stalemate, right, then you're just stuck and there's just like decisions never made. I think for us, um, and again, it's still early. Like we haven't had any like stalemates, right? Because I
Hmm.
think we're just like both like very reasonable people without, we're not like maniacs, like just it's my way or the highway type of thing. So yeah, it's actually been a great thing, right? Because we're able to do, you know, um, kind of both be like a promoter of the company at the CEO level, which really can go a long way.
I also operate on the same like co-CEO structure, and I think the number one trait I appreciate in my co-founder is humility. Just because I feel like without humility, relationships, especially at the levels where there's a lot of power involved, I think just are just so it's so easy to go wrong without humility.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's check your ego at the door, and we actually just went through our value. Like we had a company offsite last week, and everyone came in from San Francisco, and um, yeah, one of our values is actually I to the power of we, which is
Hmm.
you can't do it alone, and you have to put the team first, right, before yourself. And so yeah, how's it been going for you with regards to the co-CEO piece? And yeah,
It's
does
been
it
so
ever
good. Like I feel like so I guess we spent about a year getting to know each other in terms of our professional values as well as our personal values.
Mhm.
And I actually was planning to go like solo for the longest time just because I was afraid of those power struggles. Like I've seen, I guess it's been a long time since I've checked the numbers, but I think one of the top two, if not top three reasons that startups fail is because of disputes amongst co-founders, either across like equity or compensation or responsibility structure. And I think that's such a shame that like you couldn't, um, I guess, find like a synergistic way for it to play out. So we got to know each other over a good amount of time, worked with each other in different like aspects of life, and I guess spent time with each other in person. And I think that's when I really had that solidified in my life. Where I was like, okay, I can trust this person with effectively anything. We probably have each other's social security numbers and credit cards and like banking key. I don't know if we go that far, but we do share a lot of things that I wouldn't otherwise share with many other people. And I think it's only because that trust and rapport has been built up over time, as well as a shared understanding of what we want to achieve in life. And I think it's cool to find someone that you think wants to be ambitious without being too concerned about the end goal. Like I think a lot of people are very end goal oriented, whereas I think journey orientation is the way to be.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think too, it's you've seen like a lot of CEOs probably in the last decade, right? That kind of have this, um, yeah, well, just like super egos, right? That it's and I think that's probably due for a change, I believe, right? Which is you can be yourself and not yeah, not just like be all about like crushing the competition, putting yourself first before your employees, that type of thing. I think it's we're missing folks in the world that are servant leaders, right, that
Right.
are holding a CEO role. And I think that's what really Brennan and I bring to the table, right, with our team. And you can still kick ass and do that, right? So
I love the core concept of servant leadership, and that's I guess one of our pillars in our culture too. It's just because I feel like there's a lot of cultures out there in the world, and I'm not sure if you're familiar, but like in a lot of Asian cultures especially, there's very strong and clear power dynamics between like, oh, I'm your manager, so you have to do what I say, and I feel like over time the inefficiency of the world unravel, and people generally know what they want, and I think generally people want to work around non-egocentric people. So give it enough time, and I think most businesses will be run that way. At least, hopefully, in my idealistic future.
yeah, no, I sure hope so. I really do. So it's just I do, and I think I wonder if COVID's affected that at all,
Mm.
right? With everyone being remote, you've kind of had to give everyone a ton of autonomy, right? Whereas before, it's like in an office, it's like okay, butts and seats from 9 to 5, and you have to be there. Go into a meeting and listen to someone talk for an hour, right? Yeah, hopefully that's changed things a little bit. But yeah, are you fully remote?
Yeah, we've been fully remote by design. Like in terms of in-person interactions with my co-founder, I've seen him on like three occasions, and
Oh, is that
which is
right?
kind of interesting for someone who you share effectively all of your corporate responsibilities with. But we probably spent an hour or more every day, or at least on average every day for the past maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years.
Oh, that's you get to know someone really well.
For sure, yeah.
Oh, that's great.
I also want to go visit him in Denver and like live in his house and see how he interacts with his like wife and kids. And I feel that's another side of someone's personality you don't really get to see through Zoom. And getting to see that depth, I think, really helps you connect a little more and be patient when you disagree.
Yeah. So is your co-founder in Denver or Boulder or?
Sorry, he's in the Boulder area. I
Oh
say
no, I
Denver.
was same thing. No, I was just curious, right? Is that's just kind of another like startup hub, right?
Right,
That's
right.
That's well, it's been a startup for a hub for a while, and obviously Google opened up shop over there, and um, but yeah, no, it seems like yeah, it's been kind of crazy with like COVID, right? Have Austin, Boulder, Miami, Salt Lake. But the Miami thing is kind of funky.
Hmm.
Yeah, not fully like buying into that just yet, but we'll see.
Your team is structured between the Bay Area and Austin, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And
Yeah.
is that primarily because of you and your co-CEO, or did you choose that like that structure for a reason?
Um, yeah, well, so it's yeah, our investors are based in the Bay Area,
Okay.
and it's also yeah, co-CEO. Our our other co-founder Andrew Burleson, who's our CTO, he lived in the Bay Area and then actually moved to Austin. Kind of like similar, for a similar reason, right? Just like cost of
Hmm.
living, which we talked about before the show. And I think you know it. Yeah, it works out great. I think we'll end up having we're fully remote now, but we'll likely have just a satellite office in Austin, satellite office um, in the Bay Area, and it's something that we'll go into a couple of days a week. But yeah, I think there's certainly value, right, to going into an office,
Hmm.
right, because you can sometimes just get more done with regards to like brainstorming and planning, and I think there's still that benefit.
Right.
But yeah, when you just need to like just crank through work, right? You can do it in the comfort of your home and sometimes be more productive. So I think yeah, there's at least our belief is that, having both would be that's a win. But for now, we're remote, and we'll do like quarterly meetups here in Austin or in the Bay Area.
There's just been this increasing trend of companies going this hybrid route where like you work in office 2 or 3 days a week and you work from home 2 to 3 days a week. I think it's pretty darn cool because you get to optimize for the individual strengths of each, I guess, locale.
For sure, right? Yeah, it's if you're an introvert, right, you're just like always going to want to be at home, right? And then if you're an extrovert, you're likely going to want to be in the office. And it's kind of like good to blend the two. Um, yeah, personally, I feel like I'm an introvert extrovert. So, I like working from home and then also going into an office. I think at this point, though, just because it's been over a year of working working remote at home, in office sounds like really nice right now, at least for a couple of days of the week. Yeah, but yeah. And then how's the startup scene in Austin or Houston?
So the funny thing is, there is not a major one.
Oh, really?
There are
That's your
startups
opportunity
here.
to build it, David. I mean, this is your chance, man.
That was my original idea prior to moving to Houston. I was like, oh, if there isn't one, I'll build one. It'll be so great. Until I realized, oh, like I think there's this, like I forgot what the name of the law is, but it goes something like this: like the value of the network is the square of the number of like participants in the network. It's not like linear; it's like exponential. And I
Right.
think that helps me understand why valuations of properties in the Bay Area and LA and New York cost as much as they do. There's a strong network effect, and you have to pay for that like location. And I think that made more sense to me over time.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's been plenty of books written about that too, but I do feel like that gravitational pull is starting it's starting to disperse a little bit, right? Would you say that to be true? Or do you feel like just after this pandemic, everyone's going to just go back to the Bay Area and, you know, it'll just go back to normal? What are your thoughts on that?
Shoot, I'm not prepared for
No.
questions. I have a strong feeling that for a lot of venture-backed companies, it really makes sense to share at least a physical office some of the days. You're right that some ideas just come from like water cooler talk, and I think if you take that away, people don't really have the equivalent in the world of Zoom. I think Zoom meetings by design, if you're on the free tier by design, you have a time limit, so you try to stay
Right. Yeah,
everything
sure.
very efficient.
Right.
But I feel like I guess once you have actual traction to the point you're willing to pay for paid Zoom, your time becomes
Yeah.
important in other ways. So like, there's always a pressing urgency for something, and I think it pulls you away from those organic conversations that lead to interesting new ideas that aren't necessarily core to your current trajectory, but lead to call it the 5 to 10 year journey of the company, and not just the next 3 to 6 months. And I
Yeah.
think those interactions also improve like happiness of people. Like people love sharing ideas. People are inherently like idea machines, or at least I believe most people are idea machines. Whether they act on them or not is another thing. But I think you to take advantage of that to the full extent, they need the resources in terms of like the technical resources, the knowledge, as well as the network.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's certainly what the Bay Area can provide, right? I got to say though, Austin is really becoming that. I'm seeing it happening, right? What hasn't happened though, which you can look at like what was it, Silicon Beach, right, with like Snapchat, right? We haven't had that like breakout company,
Hmm.
right? Really in the last like 10 years, that's just been this like huge, just massive unicorn success, right? We've had like a lot of wins and acquisitions and so on and so forth, but I don't, and obviously, yeah, big commerce, recently went public, so on and so forth, but based out of Austin, but like, there hasn't been that Snapchat style win that just like has flooded Austin with a lot of venture
Hmm.
capital, which, is likely what's missing, right? You can't just have like Tesla and Apple and HP Enterprise and Oracle set up their headquarters here and like call it Silicon Valley. It's just not going to happen.
I
So
know I'm biased, but I actually prefer not having one of those super breakout companies because when I think about my memories in Silicon Valley, it's so easy to get caught up into an echo chamber where all your friends are either at Google, Facebook, Amazon, or Apple. Like I have no doubt there are good chunks of people where all
right,
of their friends are also Googlers or Applers or like Amazon employees. Like you can get so caught up in that world, whereas I think when you're in the other like call it tech hubs, you have more interactions across companies and across even like I guess different cities in the same area, and they all share a different philosophy about things. And I love the sharing of ideas. And I feel like I have a fear of echo chambers because you can think you're right, and everyone in your echo chamber will tell you you're right, and then you try to go to market and you realize how wrong you are because your echo chamber does not match your ICP.
yeah, no, I would agree with that, right? And it was actually one of the reasons I left the Bay Area, right? It's like you go to a bar or restaurant or something and you felt like you were at like a tech networking event, right? And it's like, yeah, you went out to just like relax and have fun and talk about, regular things. And then you feel like you're back in the office talking about, tech and, which is great to talk about, right? But just not all the time. And
Right.
I'd agree that having like, different conversations with different people and with different backgrounds just helps create better ideas.
I think the next place I'll move to is LA, and I'm hoping that exists there, where there is at least some tech companies. There are media companies, there are advertising companies, and I'm hoping that interacting with a bunch of those, as well as a bunch of like hospitality businesses, I'll learn things I probably couldn't have otherwise learned as efficiently in Silicon Valley or in other parts of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Where in LA are you thinking?
Oh, I haven't put enough that much thought into it yet. I know for sure I want to be in LA, like this
Yeah.
actual city of LA. In terms of
Yeah.
which part of the city, not sure yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's where you're from, right? So it's, you family and so on and so
Right.
forth. I'm sure that yeah, makes sense. Cool. Yeah.
So in terms of I guess how you balance your personal life and your professional life, do you feel like I do get it's the early days, but do you feel like you are able to balance your professional and your personal? I noticed that for a lot of people who are in the entrepreneurship track, they've been thinking about entrepreneurship for a long, long time. So even though they weren't necessarily the CEO of a company, they were thinking about it as early as like 10 years ago. And I think that it eats into like their personal life balance just because they need to spend time like fleshing out ideas.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think that when I look at my last startup, right, like there was no balance at all.
Mm.
I was working, 100 hours a week, just burning myself out completely. And there's certain like a certain threshold of hours that you can work to where it becomes like diminishing returns, right, for every hour that you put in after that. And so yeah, I think I still work a ton of hours, and I actually recently set up a rescue time to like help me track, okay, like what am I working on and when.
Mhm.
And I was like, wow, I worked a ton of hours last week. But yeah, I feel like if what I found is just like taking breaks, especially when you're working remote, and just like getting up and going for a walk is huge. Sleep is everything, right? And so, I'll add, an alarm on my phone, and I go to bed at 9 p.m. every night, right?
Mm.
And I'm in bed, and then, I'm an early bird, so I wake up around, 5 or 6, and I find like morning time is, that's just when I crush through a bunch of work, and then, afternoon, I start to fade a little more, but, I think yeah, you just cannot burn yourself out, right? Because the second you do that, your work just feels so heavy and it's hard to pull yourself out of burning yourself out, right? So, um, yeah, I guess, how about you, right? As a founder, like what does your schedule look like and how do you kind of balance things?
I think everyone starts off on the point of no balance just because you are
Right.
so passionate about getting something off the ground, and
Yeah.
you're like, I'm either like eating, sleeping, working, thinking about work, and maybe exercising. Like those are the things I can like I'll try to fit my like into my schedule, and you'll
Right.
realize they like left out like relationships,
Right.
and
Totally.
that's that's a it's a temporary trade-off, and I think everyone recognizes every moment of every day is a trade-off of some kind, and you need to figure out what trade-off makes sense for you. And I think I can't remember which book mentioned it, but there's some book that referenced the idea that for creative type roles, you can't sustainably reach peak creativity if you're working more than 60 hours a week on the regular.
Yeah.
And I
Was
don't
that,
know if
was
that's
that deep work or was it
it might have been deep work.
or was it called something Superman? Rising for Superman. Yeah. But yeah, it basically talks about like the flow state, right? And
Right,
like
right, right.
flow state. Um, and yeah, I mean, um, yeah, task switching is the death of me. I don't know about you, but
I
that is
agree.
the hardest thing, right? Because if you're focused on, something creative and then you're going into something, less creative and then trying to go back to something creative, yeah, I always find that to be a really big challenge, right? Because it just
I,
takes a long time to like rev up to get into that flow state and then it's just gone. And then you're having to, you have this residue on your brain still from like what you were doing last. But
I do this thing where I recognize my head also hates all those context switching. So
right.
I do keep a to-do list and I like do observe it and keep track of it. But for the first call 2 to 3 hours of the day, I might look at the list once, but not actually do any of the things on the list. Like I do whatever I feel like is the most important thing because I think my flow state is one when I first start working, and then two around 9 p.m.
Oh, got it.
I
Nice.
want to maximize those times as much as possible, and I do get that it's somewhat unconventional to
Yeah.
have flow at 9 p.m. or to have flow when you first start working. Most people
Right.
hit it within the first 2 to 3 hours of their work. I just feel like whenever it hits is whenever it hits, and I will defer everything else until I get all the things I want from that state. And I write down all of my ideas just because I know I'm super forgetful and I'm going to lose them otherwise.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's funny working when it's dark outside, right? Whether it be in the morning or at night. There's something about that is just yeah. There's just like no distractions, and yeah, it's nice, right? You get a ton done, but um, yeah. Do you feel like you sleep quite a bit, or is it pretty choppy? You can be
My
honest. Don't worry.
my co-founder knows that my sleep is like my one of my top priorities, but it's also one of like my major areas of like a lot of misses. And I'll set aside like 10 hours to sleep every day, and I
Yeah,
feel like my sleep efficiency is just really, really poor. So I'll just wake up a ton in the middle of the night, and I'm still trying to figure out like why that is. But
yeah.
man, if I can solve sleep, I feel like I'll unlock so much extra productivity and bandwidth in my life. But for sure, I don't set aside anything less than call it 7.5 hours of like bedtime, and whether I'm asleep or not, it's like I feel like it's out of my control.
Yeah, yeah, no, I feel you on that. Yeah, I feel I've gotten to the mode where I track everything, right? So I'm like tracking
Me
my
too.
sleep, I'm tracking my work. You know, a friend of mine wants, he's introduced me to levels, right? So it's like, oh yeah, track your, blood levels and glycose and all that. And then yeah, I'm not to that stage yet, but I feel like, it's good to track it, right? Because you're like, you can be like, oh shit, I did not sleep enough, right? I didn't, but I find like, yeah, working out tends to help with the sleep, but not always, right? I just feel like if you have a ton of work to get done, it's just always going to be in your head, right? When you're, about to fall asleep or do you dream about work ever?
Do I dream about work? That's a good question. I do not dream about work. Almost all my
Really?
dreams are
Okay, you're
highly
lucky, man.
nonsensical.
I feel like I dream about work. right?
Is
Like,
that like you get product ideas, or like are you stressed in your dreams?
no, it's just like I'm dreaming about I'm dreaming about sending emails and
That's a
working,
new one, huh?
working in Figma or, whatever
Hmm.
it is, right? And so it's weird. I'll like wake up from a dream and I'll be like, oh, I feel like I just had an entire work while I was sleeping. Now it's like time to go back to work. Great. But yeah, maybe it's just a temporary thing, 'cause we've been so busy, but hopefully we can.
Dreams are really interesting because I feel like it's one area you spend a third of your life sleeping, and I feel like for a good chunk of that you're dreaming and you just don't remember those dreams. It's
Right.
just so interesting to me. The study of dreams reveals, or the study of dreams is highly inconsistent. Like there's so many people out there who've studied dreams, and they can't come to many like consistent theories about dreams just because there's so much like contradictory evidence. Some people think like it's a reflection of like what you want, or is a reflection of like what your brain is processing, and sometimes, or people just think it's like purely nonsensical. And it's kind of interesting to see how different people have different sorts of dreams.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. Have you studied that a little bit or like read a book on it or two or?
I'm a huge fan of Jordan Peterson's work, and I've watched a lot of his lectures in the long form, and he does mention dreams a bit, but I have not gone beyond what he references in his lectures.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's some, there's always like these waves, right, of these different types of books, and I feel like over the last like 3 or 4 years, it's been like all about sleep, right? And yeah, although I haven't really caught up on those of those books, which like, you know, yeah, we're talking a ton about sleep, right? And it's like, it'd probably be a good time for me to look at getting some of those books, but I don't know really what they're going to say in the book though. Hey, you need to sleep more and you need to work out and you need to use Calm to like relax yourself before you sleep. I don't know. Maybe there's more in there than we think, but um, yeah, it seems
On
like
my
this like sleep trend that we've been in for the last couple of years,
on my to-do list for this week is to plan a in-lab sleep study, just because I feel like if I exercise daily, meditated daily, spent 30 minutes in the sun daily, um, did everything that everyone recommends in terms of sleep, I will still get poor sleep. And I just want to know like what's going on. But you're right. I do think I've never actually read a book on sleep, just
Yeah.
because I feel like what really could be said. But maybe that's the entry point to reading a book on sleep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We should just start a book club on sleep books, and just get a bunch of people to come together and we talk about sleep.
I love the idea of book clubs, but they're another form of network, and I feel like to get meaningful interactions,
Yeah.
everyone needs to be on the same page in why they want to read books, their frequency,
True.
and
Yeah. You
how
don't want to
much
be in
they
a
want to
book
read.
club where you're like being forced to read some book.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
So I know some people who read probably one book per year, and like that's just it just happens to be like one weekend they read it for the one weekend, and the rest of the year they just don't read. And I have a
Oh,
few
that's funny.
friends. I don't know if they sustainably did it, but they spend 3 hours a day, and it averages out to be about one book per day if you're reading somewhat quickly. And I feel like that's like a speed demon level, almost inhuman in my mind, to read that much. Um,
Yeah.
and you have to kind of find your cohort of people that you fall on terms of that spectrum.
What I found, David, is it's costly, but it really does the trick. So like for me, if I'm gonna read, it's gonna be at night, right? Because in the morning it's like I'm super productive, and so I'll buy the Audible book, and then I'll buy the physical book, and then I'll put the Audible at like 1.5x or like 2x. And so, normally if it was, an Audible that's 8 hours, it's now 4 hours. And then I'll follow along and read. And I feel like I can retain all the information
Hmm.
flying through it. And because you're getting you know, you're getting the visual reading of the book and then the audio, and then you're able to hit it twice as fast. And then like if
Hmm.
you're reading at night, normally I get really tired when I'm reading, right? So then I'll just like pass out. But I feel like when you're doing, you're getting hit with, reading it and then listening
Right,
to
right.
it, you stay awake. So
That is a good idea. I'll have to give that a shot. So one of the things I wish Amazon did, because I feel like I've overspent so much money on their platform because of this, is I want
yeah,
both the Kindle edition as well as the Audible edition. I'm like, gosh, Jonah, I'm paying for the same product twice. It's one of my pet peeves. but it's still worth it because I feel like books, in the grand scheme of things, are relatively low cost. Like call it, I don't know, if you have an Audible subscription, it maps out to be roughly like probably about $10 per like audiobook. And
Yep.
then if you have, I guess most Kindle books are around $10 as well. So call it $20 a book, which is roughly the same price as like a hardback book nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you normally read fiction or nonfiction or both?
I started my reading journey probably about 3 years ago, and I tried my first goal was one book per month,
Hmm.
and the year after that it was like two books per month, and almost all of it, or I guess 100% of it, was in the realm of nonfiction, just because I wanted to learn so much about the world of entrepreneurship, marketing, and sales. Because I'm from a more technical background, I know nothing prior to reading those books about like, what is marketing, what is sales,
Right.
um, and I think now that I've gone through good enough books, there's just a lot of overlap. And I think that nonfiction is good to introduce topics to you, but I feel like fiction reminds you of what life is worth living for. And it's definitely not the things a lot of like marketing would suggest that you need. For example, I think Apple's really good at making you feel like you're an inferior human being for having the less than newest iPhone.
Right. Right.
And That's how they make their money. Like I feel like I actually feel like I'm very satisfied buying fewer things as I get older. Just so I feel like, oh, it doesn't actually. Most things don't make me happier. Maybe food and maybe books. Those are the two things I really like to spend money on.
Yeah. Yeah. And are you like an unlimited subscriber with Kindle or?
I'm not. I'm not. I just like I like buying the books because I know that I want to highlight it and read the highlighted book versions later. And I
Yep.
hate paying for subscriptions because I feel like it forces me to like the frugal side of me wants to take advantage of it as much as possible. So I'll just like
Right.
binge more than past the point of enjoyment. Yeah.
Oh, I got you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're trying to like get your money for
Yes.
the
Yes.
you know.
It's like going to the buffet and overeating just because you want your like quote unquote money's worth.
Yeah, totally, totally, yeah. Yeah, speaking of, I went to a Brazilian steakhouse last night, and that was that. I'm like feeling, 8 pounds heavier today. All right, so $50 a person, unlimited steak. Okay, let's go for this. But yeah, no, it's funny.
It's funny they talk about it because just last week my friends and I were talking about all you can eat sushi just because
Oh, is that right?
so due to COVID most buffets had to like close down, so it's been a long time since I've been to one, but now I might want to go.
Oh, you should. You definitely should. Yeah, that's. I mean, in Austin, it's like no one's really wearing masks anymore in restaurants, which is kind of crazy. I feel like by habit though. I always have my mask in my pocket, right?
Me
Just
too.
it's like you can come out of a holster in the event.
Right.
You need a mask. It's like, all right, I got one. Yeah,
Well, this has been a great conversation. This has been very enjoyable, and I just want to be respectful of your time.
yeah,
So I just like to end all of my calls with the same question. What is the best way for our viewers to get in touch with you if that's something they'd like to do?
yeah. So LinkedIn. If you just type in Pete Ryan, co-sell, I should pop right up. Yeah, LinkedIn or even my email, pete@cosell.io. And yeah, likewise, David. I appreciate you taking the time, and it's really nice to get to know you.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for your time.